Brisbane City Council is not normal. If we're really honest, most people aren't especially interested in how their local council works, and that's understandable. Council processes can feel detached from our everyday lives. But in Brisbane, how the council works has an unusually large impact on what the city looks like, how it moves, and how decisions get made that affect so many aspects of our lives. So if you've ever complained to yourself about the way things are here, or felt that Brisbane is in some way more special than other cities, a big part of the answer may lie in what we'll be exploring today. And it may just go beyond the traditional ideas of roads, rates, and rubbish. Because, as I said, Brisbane City Council is not normal. It's Australia's largest council government authority by population and one of the largest by area. In fact, the population of Brisbane City is roughly the same as Tasmania, the Northern Territory and Australian Capital Territory combined. With an annual budget of around $4 billion, more people vote for the Lord Mayor of Brisbane in council elections than vote for our nation's Prime Minister in federal ones. The Brisbane Channel is all about looking at things from multiple angles and not pushing any single agenda. So we're going to look at how Brisbane City Council came to be so unique, how things operate behind the scenes, and most importantly, the way councillors navigate their jobs and feel about their work environment in this highly political system that operates more like a state or federal government than a local council. Because it seems the experience of Brisbane City councillors may be quite different depending on where in the chamber they sit. To understand Brisbane City Council today, it helps to start with how it was formed. In the early 1900s, the area we now call Brisbane was governed by 20 smaller councils and shires, each responsible for its own local area. This included 2 cities, 6 towns, and 12 shires. There were growing challenges in coordinating infrastructure and services across council boundaries, so they felt combining their governance into one mega council could bring better results. In 1924, the City of Brisbane Act was passed, and on the 1st of October 1925, just over 100 years ago, the amalgamation of all those councils, Brisbane City Council, was born. As a result, Brisbane City Council's scale and responsibilities differ significantly from those of most other local governments.
This is where the Lord Mayor sits. In the traditional Westminster tradition, the Leader of the Opposition is 2 swords away from the Leader, and so this makes this seat here the Leader of the Opposition seat.
That reference to Westminster reflects how Brisbane City Council is physically and procedurally organised.
As Deputy Mayor, I sit next to the Lord Mayor, which is just over here. These seats immediately behind the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Mayor are usually reserved for Civic Cabinet chairs, and obviously we have more than 4 chairs, so that extends to those 2 seats there. And the remainder of the seats on this side are the administration councillors, and then on the other side of the chamber, again, much like a Westminster system, you have the Leader of the Opposition and then the members of his team. We have an independent councillor in Brisbane, and she sits at the end there, and then there are 2 Greens councillors who sit around here.
The seating arrangement reflects the formal distinction between the administration and the opposition. This is not typical of most local councils. Here in Brisbane, a councillor's political affiliation is not incidental. It's actually central to how the council operates.
So Brisbane City Council is very unique. It's unique not just for a Queensland council, but in an Australian context. So capital city councils and inner city councils in Melbourne and Sydney, there are lots of small councils. You do find political divisions in there. There will be independents as well as party councillors. Very rare that you'd have an administration that is a majority one party though in those systems. Whereas in Brisbane, we have had a long history of majority administrations of political natures. So from the 1960s right up to the 1980s, a period of sort of strong, stable Labor majorities. Then Sally Ann Atkins, the mayor with a Liberal majority, then a long period of Labor, and now a long period of LNP again that we're currently in. So it is unique in that it operates has the functions of a council, obviously, roads, rates, rubbish, fees and charges, the usual things a council does. But how we operate as a council, as in the 26 of us sitting together in the council chamber, is a bit more parliamentary than it is a normal council meeting. So the big difference, I would say to people, is that we operate more like a state parliament, for instance, than a neighbouring council. If you went and watched a council meeting in Moreton Bay or Logan or Ipswich or Sunny Coast or Gold Coast, even though there are councillors who are members of political parties, they do fundamentally work, I think, largely in a collaborative way. There's obviously differences they have in council meetings, but their council meetings are largely collaborative, whereas ours is adversarial, just sort of by its design. We have a leader of the opposition, which I am. We have an administration and chairs of committees that act more like ministers, I guess, than committee chairs in other councils. So how you get things done then and how that flows on to the work of council is a bit more like government.
A key part of understanding how Brisbane City Council functions is understanding the Civic Cabinet. In simple terms, the Civic Cabinet is the council's executive decision-making group. It's broadly comparable to a state or federal cabinet, but at the city level. Each Civic Cabinet member is an elected councillor who holds responsibility for a major policy area and plays a role in shaping proposals before they come to the full council. In Brisbane City Council, all members of the Civic Cabinet come from the majority party. Opposition Labor councillors, Greens and Independents do not sit on the Civic Cabinet. As a result, many proposals are developed and prioritised within that group before they're debated publicly. By the time items reach the council chamber, the administration typically already has the numbers required to pass them. For councillors entering Brisbane City Council for the first time, this structure can be an adjustment. Emily Kim, who represents the Callum Vale ward and sits within the Labor opposition, is currently serving her first term.
Well, I was born and raised here. I was born in Sunnybank and I literally grew up in Callum Vale. So as a young person myself, I know that council services, it was something that I used every single day. If anything, I think the young demographic are the key clientele for Brisbane City Council services. We use the footpaths, the bus stops, we use every single free amenity, the library services. It's the stuff that we really need at this age because it's not something that you can necessarily afford while you go to school. So I felt like there was so much that I had in my mind that I really wanted to contribute at the local government level.
What she describes is not the existence of politics, but how extensively it shapes day-to-day outcomes.
I really didn't expect council to be as political as it is, being one of the largest councils in all of Australia. I really underestimated just how much politics goes into play just to get basic outcomes like fixing footpaths, getting your grass mowed, getting potholes repaired. It really comes from a broader funding level, which myself as a local councillor, as an opposition councillor, one of 5, winning a seat that was Labor Party's first in a long time for an area like this here. It's a very difficult uphill battle to get small outcomes.
For a new councillor, the difference between expectations and lived experience can be significant. For Trina Massey, the chamber experience is challenging.
There is a duality in the sense that there is almost 2 components of the job that are very different. And one part of the job is being in chambers. That is definitely my statutory requirement, and that is a place where I can get residents' voices heard. And I'm not going to pretend that that is easy. I don't know any other workplace where the behaviour that I experience and see would be acceptable.
For her, the chamber does not feel like a conventional workplace, but rather a highly adversarial political environment.
Like there's a lot of mind games that happen in there. And so it is a really startling place.
So far, we've mostly heard from councillors outside the administration. Nicole Johnston provides a different perspective. She was elected in 2008 as a councillor for the Liberal National Party, forming part of the governing administration.
I joined the Young Liberals when I was 17 in my last year at university. So when it came time to run here, I came home. I'd been working in Sydney and Canberra, and there was a vacancy. The ward of Tennyson had been created for the first time, and I was encouraged by one of my mentors to give it a go. And that was a great opportunity. It was for the Liberal Party at that point. And I ran, gave it everything I had and won.
A turning point for her came during a local planning decision involving a proposed bus depot.
There were two really big issues that came up in my first term. This is in 2009. The first was the Sherwood bus depot. And that was very disappointing. I was told that there was a proposal to put a bus depot at Rocklea. That's what I was told. And Rocklea's an industrial suburb. At the time, it was in my area. And I thought, okay, well, bus depot in Rocklea, sure, no problems. When the council papers came out, which come out a few days before the council meeting, it turns out that the bus depot was in Sherwood, which is a residential suburb, and it was on the edge of the residential suburb. But it was in an area where it flooded, where it was going to have an impact on local streets, and I was absolutely no way as far as I was concerned because of the impact of that bus depot. So I wrote a 3-page memo saying why it was a bad idea, made suggestions about where else it could go. And in response to me putting in that submission, I was told if I did not withdraw that submission, I would be expelled from the party. So that was, I thought, they can't expel me. I have been a good, loyal party member. None of this was public. It was all, I'd raised these issues internally behind the scenes. So, that was happening. At the same time, there was also this plan to upzone parts of Sherwood and Corinda from low density to medium density. And that process had started before I became the local councillor. And again, I was told I had to be quiet, not raise it, not cause any drama. But when it was presented, the community just went nuts about it. And I couldn't, in good conscience, sit back and say, well, you've got to accept this. This is going to be good for you, because it hasn't been. So a couple of things happened at the same time. I ended up crossing the floor on the bus depot, and then Campbell Newman did everything he possibly could to try and have me expelled from the LNP. The first expulsion motion didn't work. Because I knew a lot of people. Some people spoke up for me that I had worked with previously. So they suspended me. And that wasn't enough. Newman then immediately wanted me to be expelled again. And it was very distressing personally. And I decided to resign from the party that I'd been a member of for nearly 20 years and became an independent. And to be honest, that all happened in early 2010. It's been excellent as far as I'm concerned. I been able to put the community first and to do what I think is right based on my values and the community's values, and I think that's a really positive thing for politics.
Supporters of Brisbane City Council structure argue that a strongly party-based system brings clarity, stability and predictability to a very large and complex city. From this perspective, Brisbane isn't just managing neighbourhood issues, it's governing a capital city with long-term infrastructure, transport and financial responsibilities.
I think there are certainly some benefits to that. One of the key benefits, I think, for the community is the transparency around which way councillors are likely to vote or support matters that relate to the community. There's a bit more certainty. With other councils, you might not necessarily know how a council you may not necessarily know how a council would vote on something, but we're elected on a party line, and so you're held to account for those party values and you're held to account for what you're elected to. If you are an independent councillor, there's a little bit more perhaps uncertainty as to the way in which you may fall to vote on certain topics.
That predictability is seen as a strength. Voters know which party is responsible for decisions, what program of work was taken to the election, and who to hold accountable if commitments aren't delivered. In this view, elections aren't just about choosing individual councillors, they're about endorsing a coherent plan for the city as a whole.
I think it depends on the way you look at it, because councillors who are in those civic cabinet chair roles have a responsibility to their local communities, but they also have that citywide I suppose, element that they need to represent and that they need to consider for the whole of Brisbane. And as all councillors do, but Civic Cabinet chairs have that extra layer of responsibility to consider portfolio matters from Brisbane's perspective.
Supporters argue that party discipline helps make that possible in a council of this size. It reduces internal fragmentation, allows the council to act decisively, and it provides continuity across election cycles, even as individual councillors change. From this perspective, the value councillors bring to constituents is not just advocacy, it's participation in a governing team that can implement large-scale policies. The understanding of value looks different from the way some other councillors describe their role. For Emily Kim, representation starts at the local level.
I would say the predominant number of requests we get from our office, they're all about small basic maintenance jobs. It's the long grass, it's the broken footpaths, it's the lack of bus stops on the street, which again are quite expensive to service. And I think the priorities and values need to be shifted from the start with the way that this council is running. And I think it takes a fresh perspective to actually do that from the top down.
In that framing, councillors are not primarily vehicles for party platforms. They're conduits between residents and the institution. Value comes from raising local concerns, advocating for specific outcomes, and responding directly to the needs of a ward. From this perspective, a highly centralised system can feel limiting, especially when local priorities don't align neatly with citywide agendas. What becomes clear is that Brisbane City Council brings together two different ideas of democratic value. One emphasises mandate, coherence, and delivery at scale. The other emphasises local representation, responsiveness, and advocacy for specific communities. The party-based structure privileges the first, but it doesn't remove the second. Instead, it brings tension between the two. Nicole Johnston's experience doesn't, on its own, determine whether the system works or not, but it does illustrate where that tension can surface, when local advocacy collides with party discipline, even within the governing team. So is Brisbane City Council's party-based system effective? It offers stability and clear lines of responsibility. It enables decisive action at a citywide scale, and it applies parliamentary-style politics to local government. At the same time, it concentrates decision-making within the majority. It limits who sits at the executive table, and it can constrain how local representation is expressed. Whether that balance is appropriate or desirable depends on perspective, including where councillors sit within the system, what they believe their primary role should be, and how they think value is derived to the people they represent. To keep up to date with the way decisions made in Brisbane's council chamber impact our lives, the Brisbane Channel's weekly updates can keep you in the loop, so make sure you're subscribed with all notifications enabled. Here's the last one, in case you haven't seen it yet. See ya.